My name is Olivia, and at 18 years old, I testified against my war hero dad, while my sister's blood sugar monitors still beeped in court. The truth broke him before the verdict did. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. I was 13 when Dad abandoned me and my younger brother at his mother's place. He was leaving for Iraq for 9 months, and she was an alcoholic who had beaten us. The worst part was how, just 3 weeks ago, he fought tooth and claw to gain custody and separate us from Mom. The first week was hellish. Grandma would pass out on the couch by 4 p.m., leaving us to fend for ourselves. Luca had type 1 diabetes and needed insulin at 7 p.m., but Grandma was too drunk to remember. I attempted to help, but I was a girl, a child, and had no idea what I was doing. Luca started getting sick more frequently. He'd throw up and become dizzy, but Grandma would simply urge him to quit being dramatic. We started arriving at school looking like garbage. Our clothes were soiled, and we were usually hungry since Grandma spent her money on whiskey rather than groceries. I made excuses for her when teachers inquired about our appearance. The real trouble occurred when the neighbors saw. They'd notice us outside at odd hours searching for food in their garbage cans. I remember knocking on one of their doors in the middle of the night and asking if they had any cold leftovers they weren't going to eat. When the woman heard me, she seemed really sorrowful. "Where is your grandmother, sweetheart?" she questioned me. "She's sleeping. She sleeps a lot because she works so much," I explained. I was becoming better at lying. The neighbor woman began leaving sandwiches on our porch. Other neighbors did as well, and before I knew it, she had contacted Child Protective Services for us. A woman named Amelia Ward arrived to investigate. She seemed polite at first, asking us a lot of questions about Grandma. I wanted to tell her everything, but I was afraid of what Dad would do if he discovered we'd snitched. "Is your grandmother taking good care of you?" Amy asked. I looked at Luca, who was pale and wobbly from not taking his morning insulin. "Yeah, she takes good care of us," I'd said. But Amelia could tell we were starved and filthy. She took notes and indicated she would return to check on us. I hoped things would finally change. But then Dad came home on emergency leave after Amelia contacted him. He arrived in his full combat outfit, looking authoritative and frightening. Amelia was there waiting to speak with him, and I could tell she was nervous. "Sir, I've received some concerning reports about the children's care," she told him. Dad shut her off instantly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I have served 4 tours in Iraq defending our country. I believe I understand how to choose proper care for my children. My mother reared me, and I turned out well." Amelia shifted uneasily. "I understand your service, sir, but the neighbors have reported signs of neglect." "Those neighbors are just anti-military liberals who don't like having a veteran's family in their neighborhood," my dad added. His voice became louder and more hostile. "They're harassing my family while I'm overseas, protecting their freedom." Amelia started to back down. She discussed her own son's deployment and the difficulties that military families face. Dad nodded, as if they were great pals now. "My mother is a member of our family," Dad said. "She knows these kids better than some of our stranger neighbors. I trust her completely, and frankly, I'm offended that people are trying to attack a veteran's family." Amelia apologized and stated she would not pursue it further. She left, and Dad returned to Iraq the next day. He drew me aside before leaving. "If you ever tell lies about Grandma again, you'll regret it," he told me. "Grandma made me strong, and she will make you tough too. Stop being weak." Things got a lot worse after that. Grandma's drinking grew, and she began laying hands on us when we requested food or reminded her about Luca's insulin. The neighbors continued to try to help, but they felt powerless because CPS had ignored their worries. Luca was getting progressively ill. Then the worst thing happened. Dad went on another deployment, and Grandma missed Luca's insulin for 2 days. I watched my younger brother degrade hour after hour. He was frequently puking up and couldn't remain awake. His breathing became very shallow. "Luca, you need to stay with me," I kept telling him, but he was drifting in and out of awareness. When he refused to wake up, I contacted 911. The paramedics took him to the hospital, where the doctor diagnosed diabetic ketoacidosis. They claimed he came close to death. A different social worker, Sophia Mueller, visited the hospital. She looked through Luca's medical records and noticed a pattern of missed insulin injections and mistreatment. She didn't care about Dad's military service or the fact that Grandma was family. "This is medical neglect, and it's life-threatening," she stated to me. "I am filing an emergency petition with the judge today." She bypassed the local CPS office and went straight to family court. Before I knew it, Dad had been called, and he was back on a plane, ready to take us home. Dad's presence enveloped the hospital room like a storm cloud. He passed by Sophia without acknowledging her, his boots clicking on the linoleum floor. I saw him approach Luca's bed, where my younger brother was hooked up to monitors and IV drips. The devices beeped regularly, monitoring his heart rate and blood sugar levels, which the doctors were still attempting to normalize. "What has happened to my son?" Dad's voice had that deadly edge I knew all too well. He turned to face me, and my stomach dropped. His jaw was clenched, and I could see a muscle quivering beneath his skin. Sophia walked forward, clutching a big folder containing medical records. "Mr. Callahan, your son nearly died of diabetic ketoacidosis. The hospital records indicate a trend of missed insulin injections over the last few weeks." Dad's eyes narrowed. He stiffened his shoulders, making himself appear even more imposing in his military fatigues. "So, who exactly are you?" "My name is Sophia Mueller, and I work as a social worker for the county. I've been appointed to look into this case of medical neglect." "Medical neglect?" Dad raised his voice slightly. "My mother has been looking after these children while I serve our country. Any concerns about Luca's treatment are simply misconceptions." I squeezed against the wall, hoping to disappear. Sophia opened the folder and took out a few documents. "Here are Luca's blood sugar diaries from past hospital trips. The pattern is clear. He'd been admitted 4 times in the previous month, all with dangerously high blood sugar levels." Dad grabbed the papers from her hands and swiftly scanned them. His expression darkened as he read each page. "Where did you acquire this?" "They are part of Luca's medical record." Sophia stayed calm despite Dad's hostile demeanor. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman entered, her graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She glanced between Dad and Sophia before settling on Luca's chart. "Hello, my name is Dr. Anika Novak. I have been treating your youngster." Dad quickly changed his approach, extended his hand with a practiced smile. "Doctor, thank you for taking care of my son. When can we take him home?" Dr. Novak did not reciprocate the smile. "Mr. Callahan, your son almost died. His blood sugar level was over 580 when he arrived. He had a diabetic coma. This amount of negligence may have resulted in death." "Neglect is a strong word, doctor," Dad replied smoothly. "My mother is elderly and occasionally forgets things. I'll make sure she receives better reminders about his insulin schedule." Dr. Novak shook her head. "This extends beyond ordinary forgetfulness. Luca's A1C readings show that he has had poor blood sugar control for several months. He's terribly emaciated and appears dehydrated. These are signs of systemic neglect." I saw Dad's hands clench into fists at his sides. Sophia noticed as well and quickly positioned herself between Dad and the doctor. "Mr. Callahan, we need to talk about alternative care arrangements for your children," Sophia said. "What about alternative arrangements?" Dad's voice lowered to a low growl. "These are my kids. I decide what is best for them." "The court will make that decision," Sophia stated firmly. "I have already filed an emergency petition. There is a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning." Dad's face became red. He made a step towards Sophia, and I immediately shifted closer to Luca's bed. "You have no rights. I serve this country by protecting people like you, and this is how you repay me?" Dr. Novak pushed a button on the wall. "Mr. Callahan, I'll have to ask you to lower your voice. This is the pediatric ward." 2 security guards appeared at the doorway. Dad noticed them and took a deep breath, apparently attempting to suppress his fury. He turned back to Sophia. "This was a mistake. My mother raised me and my siblings properly. She is family. Family cares for family." "Family doesn't let children nearly die from preventable medical emergencies," Sophia told him. "The evidence is clear. Your mother is incapable of providing adequate care." Dad stared at me, and I noticed a difference in his expression. It was calculating, almost predatory. "Daughter, tell them. Tell them how beautifully Grandma cares for you." My mouth became dry. I looked at Luca, who was still unconscious on the hospital bed, and at Sophia, who was watching me with concern. Dr. Novak walked closer to me, establishing a subtle barrier between Dad and where I was standing. My voice broke. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Grandma drinks a lot." The words hung in the air like a confession. Dad's face changed from crimson to purple. "Girl, you have no idea what you are saying. You're perplexed and scared." Sophia stepped forward. "Let her speak, Mr. Callahan." But I couldn't say anything more. My throat felt as though it was closing up. Dad's look pierced through me, and I knew there would be consequences later. There always were. Dad pulled the "I served my country" card faster than a magician with a rabbit, except that instead of solving problems, He was making everyone uncomfortable, while his child was connected to more gadgets than a gaming setup. Dr. Novak intervened. I believe we should give Luca a rest. Mr. Callahan, your visiting hours are about to end, a nurse added gently. I'm not leaving my son, Dad stated flatly. Actually, given the circumstances, I think it's best if the children have some space, Sophia said. She took out her phone. I can have security escort you out if necessary. Dad's jaw worked silently for a time. Then he grinned, but not with his eyes. Fine, I'll leave, but it's not over. I'll see you in court tomorrow, and we'll see what the judge thinks of someone attempting to break up a military family. He approached the door, hesitated, and returned my gaze. I'll be staying at Grandma's tonight. We have a lot to talk. After he went, my entire body began shaking. Sophia sat in the chair next to me and gently touched my shoulder. You did the correct thing. I know that was difficult. He's going to call me, I said quietly. No, he is not. You are not going back there tonight. I have arranged for an emergency placement. You will remain somewhere safe until the hearing. Dr. Novak checked Luca's monitors again. He should awaken soon. His blood sugar is normalizing beautifully, but he will need ongoing care. No more missed dosages. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I attempted to help him. I truly did, but I didn't know how to use the insulin pen correctly, and Grandma would be upset if I touched her belongings. None of this is your fault, Dr. Novak stated firmly. You're 13 years old. You should not be liable for your brother's medical care. Sophia's phone vibrated. She examined it and grimaced. Your father has phoned my supervisor. He claims I am discriminating against him because of his military service. Is it going to work? I inquired, fear creeping back in. No, the medical data is overwhelming, but he is going to fight this hard. She looked at me gravely. I need you to prepare for tomorrow. The judge will want to hear from you. I cannot testify against Dad. He will never forgive me. You will not be testifying against him. You will disclose the truth about what happened to Luca. There is a difference. But I knew Dad wouldn't view things that way. In his world, commitment to family meant being silent at all times. Breaking the code represented the ultimate treachery. A quiet groan emanated from the bed. Luca's eyes flickered open, unfocused and perplexed. Where am I? I jumped up and took his hand. You are in the hospital. You got terribly sick, but you'll be okay. He took a careful glance around at the machinery and IV lines. My head hurts. Dr. Novak walked to his side and examined his pupils with a little light. That is normal, Luca. You've been really unwell, but you're improving now. Where is Grandma? He asked. Sophia and I exchanged looks. She's at home, I explained cautiously. Good, Luca muttered. She was really mad about something. I don't remember what. Sophia wrote another note in her file. Every detail mattered now as we built the argument that would define our future. I sat back down, still holding Luca's hand, and tried not to think about what Dad was doing at Grandma's place, probably coaching her on what to say and ensuring their stories were consistent. Sophia organized an emergency placement at a foster family approximately 30 minutes from the hospital. The family appeared pleasant enough. The Harrisons, an older couple, lived in a quiet house that smelled like vanilla candles. They led me to a small bedroom that contained a twin bed and a desk. The bathroom is down the hall, Mrs. Harrison murmured softly. There are clean towels in the closet. Are you hungry? I shook my head, despite the fact that I had not eaten anything all day. My stomach was too twisted from anxiousness to handle meals. After they went, I sat on the side of the bed, staring at my hands. They still shook slightly. I could not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face in the hospital room, how his expression changed from charm to wrath and back again. I knew he was plotting something. He always had a plan. The next morning, Mrs. Harrison drove me to the courthouse. The structure was old and frightening, with massive columns and large wooden doors. Sophia greeted us in the lobby, holding a heavy briefcase. How is Luca? I inquired instantly. He's doing well. Still in the hospital, but improving. Dr. Novak will testify via phone about his condition. She guided us through security and down a lengthy hallway. The hearing is in family court. It's less formal than regular court, but you have to speak the truth. We entered a small courtroom with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting. Dad was already present, sitting at a table with a man in a suit who must have been his lawyer. Grandma sat behind them in the gallery, dressed for church and looking more sober than I had seen her in months. Dad had also cleaned up. His uniform was neatly pressed, and he had shaved thoroughly. He appeared to be the ideal soldier, the type of person you'd trust with everything. He did not glance at me when we sat at the opposite table. The judge entered, an elderly woman with short gray hair and glasses perched above her nose. She read the documents in front of her before gazing up into the courtroom. This is an emergency hearing for custody of 2 small children. I have studied both the petition and the medical records. Let us start with the social worker's report. Sophia rose and began presenting the evidence. She was meticulous and clinical, outlining the history of neglect, including missing insulin injections and several hospitalizations. She showed images of our living conditions at Grandma's house, including the empty refrigerator and the bottles stashed throughout the rooms. Dad's lawyer objected multiple times, claiming that the images were taken without permission, that the medical records were being misconstrued, and that this was a deliberate attack on a military family. The judge overruled most of his concerns while allowing him to present his arguments. When it was time for Dad to speak, he transformed. The irate man from the hospital was no longer among us. In his place stood a dedicated father, exhausted from war service, doing his best in hard circumstances. Your Honor, I have served 4 deployments in Iraq. I have given everything for my country and my children. When their mother proved inadequate, I battled for custody to provide them with stability. I trusted my mother to care for them while I served our country. He went on to discuss the difficulties that military families face, the absence of support structures, and the judgment of civilians who do not comprehend sacrifice. Several times he cited his medals, commendations, and impeccable service record. Grandma testified next, and I barely recognized her. She expressed her love for us openly, stating that she had done her best despite her age and health concerns. She agreed to being forgetful on occasion, but denied frequent drinking. She said the bottles in the images were old and from before we moved in. Then it was my turn. My legs felt like jello as I approached the witness stand. The judge smiled at me warmly. Tell the truth, daughter. That's all we need. Dad's lawyer began with simple inquiries about my name, age, and how long I had lived with Grandma. Then he got to the hard part. Did your grandmother ever abuse you? I looked at Dad. Although his countenance was neutral, I could see the caution in his eyes. Sometimes she gets upset. That wasn't what I asked. Has she ever physically harmed you? My hands clutched the edge of the witness box. Yes. Could you be more specific? I detailed some of the occurrences as calmly as I could. The lawyer attempted to reduce each one, implying that I was exaggerating or misremembering. But Sophia had prepared me for this, so I adhered to the truth. How about your father? How is he treating you? This was a minefield. I chose my words carefully. He has high expectations. Does he love you? Yes. Does he want the best for you? I paused. The judge leaned forward slightly. You can take your time. He wants us to be strong, I finally explained. He thinks Grandma's house makes us strong. The lawyer pressed on, but I had found my beat. I responded frankly but cautiously, attempting to construct a picture without openly accusing Dad of anything that might elicit retaliation. Dr. Novak's testimony was later delivered via telephone in the courtroom. She was forthright about Luca's condition and the extent of the mistreatment. She used medical words that I didn't understand, but her conclusion was clear. Luca could have died and would die if put back in the same position. The judge questioned Dad directly about the medical neglect. He had an answer to everything. Grandma was becoming old and needed help remembering. He had attempted to establish support services, but the military bureaucracy was slow. He had no idea how awful things had gotten because no one had informed him. Your daughter tried to tell a social worker weeks ago, the judge said. Your Honor, children sometimes exaggerate to get attention. They have had a difficult time during my deployment. They are acting out. The hearing lasted for hours. Each side provided evidence, made arguments, and pointed fingers. Throughout it all, I observed Dad execute. He was skilled at moving between devoted father, wounded veteran, and victim of an unfair system when necessary. Finally, the judge asked for a recess to make her ruling. We waited in the hallway, Sophia talking quietly on the phone with her supervisor, Dad and his lawyer scheming in a corner, and Grandma sitting on a seat looking older and more vulnerable than normal. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge appeared serious. It's a tricky case. On the one side, we have a man serving his nation while trying to provide for his children in difficult circumstances. On the other side, we have compelling medical proof of life-threatening neglect, she continued, stating the facts as she saw them. My heart beat as she approached her decision. The court finds that returning the children to their grandmother's care would pose an immediate risk to their health and safety. The judge was creating tension as if she were holding a reality show finale, but Luca's life was on the line. Temporary custody is granted to the Department of Children's Services pending a full investigation and permanent custody hearing. Dad shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is incorrect. These are my kids. Sit down, Mr. Callahan, or I'll hold you in contempt. The judge's voice was steely. You'll be able to provide a complete plan for their care during the permanent hearing. Until then, the kids will remain in foster care. She scheduled the next hearing for 4 months out, giving Dad time to make plans that did not involve Grandma. As we left the courthouse, Dad grabbed my arm. This isn't over, he stated gently. You are still my daughter. Remember that? Sophia intervened and led me away, but I could feel his gaze on my back as we walked down the corridor. I knew he was already plotting his next move. Dad always had a plan. The drive back to the Harrisons' house seemed unreal. Mrs. Harrison kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with concern. I peered out the window, seeing familiar streets pass by, knowing Dad was somewhere out there, planning his next move. Back at the foster home, I attempted to eat the sandwich Mrs. Harrison prepared, but my hands trembled. Every car passing outside made me jump. I knew Dad's strategy. He'd start small, probing boundaries and discovering flaws. The first sign appeared that evening. Mr. Harrison responded to a knock at the door, and I heard Dad's voice, calm and reasonable. My blood turned icy. I crept to the top of the stairs, listening as Dad said he only wanted to check on his daughter and make sure I was comfortable. Mr. Harrison respectfully but firmly informed him that visits were to be arranged through Sophia. Dad thanked him for taking care of me, his voice tinged with false gratitude. After he left, Mrs. Harrison found me hunched on the steps. She helped me back to my room and sat beside me on the bed as I told her about Dad's methods. He'd charm them first, making them believe he was sensible. She listened intently and promised they'd be careful. The next morning, Sophia called. Dad had filed a complaint with her boss, alleging she had broken protocol and had a personal grudge against military families. He had also called the foster care licensing board, accusing the Harrisons of poisoning me against him. Sophia told me that these tactics would not work, but I could sense the strain in her voice. At the hospital, Luca was improving. The nurses allowed me to sit with him as he ate his first solid meal in days. He inquired about Grandma again, and I told him she was sick and couldn't visit. It wasn't entirely a lie. Dr. Novak taught me how to correctly administer insulin, something I had desperately tried to figure out on my own at Grandma's place. The situation became more serious on the second day. Dad arrived at the hospital during my visit with Luca. He entered wearing his formal uniform, medals gleaming. The nurses nearly swooned. He brought Luca a teddy bear and me a book about military heroes. He acted like the ideal father, inquiring about Luca's care, thanking the nurses, complimenting the staff. But when he pulled me aside near the vending machines, his grasp on my shoulder was anything but kind. His fingers pressed in deep, the pain masked by a practiced smile. He spoke quietly about family loyalty, disappointment, and how much easier things could have been if I had just told the truth. When Sophia arrived for her regular visit, Dad was sitting by Luca's bed, reading him a story, the epitome of fatherly devotion. That night, the Harrisons got several phone calls. The first few were hang-ups. Then came calls from Dad's military buddies, explaining what a terrific man he was and how everything was a misunderstanding. One caller claimed the Harrisons didn't understand military families and were being manipulated by a troubled child. The psychological assault intensified over the next week. Dad filed a formal complaint with the military, alleging Sophia had harassed him and interfered with his service. He launched a social media campaign, sharing photos of himself in uniform, along with carefully worded statements about fighting for his children. Comments flooded in, praising the loyal soldier parent who was being persecuted by the system. Military recruiters suddenly became highly interested in visiting my classroom at the new school I'd started attending after leaving the foster home. They shared stories about honor, devotion, and family values. One of them remarked how painful it must be when children betrayed their parents. The message was clear. Dad began showing up everywhere, maintaining a legal distance yet making his presence felt. He'd be at the grocery store when Mrs. Harrison took me there. He'd drive by the school during recess. He'd sit in the hospital cafeteria during my visits with Luca, reading a newspaper, never approaching, but always watching. Everyone was feeling the pressure. The Harrisons began receiving bad reviews on their foster care profile from anonymous accounts. Sophia's supervisor summoned her for multiple meetings to address the allegations. Even Dr. Novak admitted someone had questioned her medical license, claiming she exaggerated Luca's condition. 2 weeks before the permanent custody court date, Dad made his boldest move. He scheduled an interview with a local TV station about the struggles military families face. He sat in his apartment surrounded by photos of us and his medals, speaking eloquently about the sacrifices he'd made and how the system failed veterans. He never mentioned the neglect or Luca's near death. Instead, he painted himself as a devoted father punished for serving his country. The interview aired during prime time. Within hours, Sophia's office was flooded with calls supporting Dad. The Harrisons found hateful notes on their car windshield, calling them unpatriotic. Someone spray-painted, "Support our troops," on their garage door. I felt the walls closing in. Dad was winning the public relations war. He had turned us into symbols, me as the ungrateful daughter, and himself as the tortured hero. Sophia warned me that he was preparing to claim the entire system was biased against him. Luca was hospitalized longer than expected. His blood sugar spiked any time he got agitated, which happened every time Dad visited. Dr. Novak documented everything, noting that Luca's anxiety seemed directly tied to Dad's presence. Dad retaliated by hiring a private specialist who claimed Luca's health issues were caused by the trauma of being separated from family. The foster home became a pressure cooker. Mr. Harrison started having problems at work after someone called, suggesting he was harboring a child who lied about a veteran. Mrs. Harrison found her car tires slashed one morning. They never said anything to me, but I saw the exhaustion in their faces. Dad's lawyer filed motion after motion, asking for increased visitation, psychiatric testing to prove I'd been coached, and an expedited custody return. Each filing was sent to Sophia's supervisors, the judge, and several military advocacy groups. The lawyer described a pattern of systemic prejudice against a decorated veteran. 3 weeks into foster care, I made a life-changing decision. I began keeping a journal, writing down everything I remembered about living at Grandma's house. I wrote about finding empty insulin bottles beneath couch cushions, trying to wake Grandma to save Luca, and hiding bruises with long sleeves. I recorded dates, times, and specific incidents. It was painful to relive, but I knew memories could be dismissed. Written records were harder to deny. Sophia helped me submit the journal to the court, but Dad's lawyer immediately questioned its validity. He claimed I'd been trained to write it and that the timing was suspicious. He demanded handwriting analysis and psychological testing to see if I was being controlled. The psychological evaluation was exhausting. The court-appointed psychologist questioned me about my relationships with my father, grandmother, and mother. Dad had prepared well for this, having already submitted his own psychiatric evaluation from a military psychiatrist who certified his mental stability and devotion to his children. During my evaluation, I tried to balance truth and self-preservation. I knew Dad would read every word in the report. I had to be honest enough to protect Luca, but cautious enough not to provoke Dad's anger. The psychologist noted my hypervigilance, my tendency to minimize negative events, and my protective instincts toward Luca. She said these were signs of a child forced to take on adult responsibilities too early. Dad's lawyer twisted this, claiming Sophia had coached me to display those traits. Meanwhile, Luca's health became the central battlefield. Dad called in experts who testified that diabetes management for elderly caregivers could be difficult, and mistakes didn't necessarily amount to neglect. They claimed Luca's deterioration was due to stress from being away from his family. Dr. Novak countered with data. She presented Luca's blood sugar logs, showing clear patterns of decline under Grandma's care and improvement under hospital supervision. She explained how close Luca had come to death and how diabetic ketoacidosis could cause lasting organ damage. But Dad's experts argued the improvement could simply be due to hospital treatment. The public pressure grew. A veterans advocacy group launched a petition demanding full custody for Dad. They held rallies outside the courthouse, waving flags and carrying signs reading "Honor Our Heroes." Luca's blood sugar spikes every time Dad visited were his body's way of filing its own custody complaint. Even his diabetes seemed to know whose side it was on. Local politicians started weighing in, careful not to seem anti-veteran. One night, someone threw a rock through the Harrisons' window. Attached was a note calling them traitors, destroying a military family. The police came, but without witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. I overheard Mr. Harrison asking his wife whether they could keep fostering me safely. Dad escalated his efforts by reaching out to military news outlets. He gave interviews about the unique challenges of deployed parents and how the system failed to understand military families. He spoke emotionally about missing birthdays and holidays while serving overseas, insisting all he wanted was to be home with his children. The story shifted. Instead of being seen as a father who put his kids in danger, Dad became a symbol of how the country failed its veterans. Online forums exploded with support for him. People who had never met us suddenly had strong opinions about our family. Sophia was drowning in paperwork and complaints. Her supervisor assigned another worker to review how she'd handled our case. Dad's lawyer argued that Sophia had a history of bias against military families, citing an old case where she'd removed children from another veteran's home. At school, I felt invisible, or worse, infamous. My father's identity had spread, and classmates either avoided me or called me the soldier's daughter who turned on her dad. Teachers looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. One substitute teacher even said out loud that some kids just don't understand the sacrifices their parents make. The Harrisons did their best to shield me, but I could see the cracks forming. They had fostered dozens of children over the years, but they'd never faced this level of harassment. Mrs. Harrison began having panic attacks. Mr. Harrison installed security cameras after finding their trash cans overturned several times. 6 weeks into foster care, Dad pulled his biggest card. He announced his retirement from the military, claiming he wanted to devote his life to his children. At a press conference held in the Veterans Hall, surrounded by other soldiers, he spoke about choosing family over service. Cameras flashed as he held up a framed photo of Luca and me. He even presented a job offer from a local security firm to prove he could provide a stable home. It changed everything. The main reason for keeping us in foster care was Dad's deployments. Now, he'd eliminated that obstacle and painted himself as a father who sacrificed everything for his kids. The veteran community rallied harder than ever behind him. Luca was moved from the hospital to a specialized medical foster home. Dad's lawyer argued that my presence might influence Luca to speak against his father, so I was only allowed supervised visits. Luca seemed withdrawn during those short visits. He kept asking when we could go home, though I don't think he even knew where home was anymore. The permanent custody hearing loomed like a storm cloud. Dad's attorney filed motion after motion, requesting access to every piece of evidence: medical records, Sophia's emails, foster care reports. He was constructing a narrative that the entire system had conspired against a decorated veteran. Sophia worked tirelessly to counter every motion. She gathered affidavits from neighbors who'd witnessed the abuse, obtained Luca's full medical history, and documented Dad's pattern of manipulation. But for every fact Sophia presented, Dad's team had a counter-argument. The weekend before the hearing, Dad made one last move. He organized a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse, framed as a prayer gathering for separated military families. Hundreds attended. The local news covered it extensively. Dad gave a speech about forgiveness, healing, and bringing families back together. He said he was even willing to go to therapy to become a better father. Watching the coverage from the Harrisons' living room, I felt sick. Dad had twisted the entire narrative, from child endangerment to government overreach. He'd turned public opinion into a weapon, hiding behind patriotism like a shield. Mrs. Harrison sat beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. "The truth will come out," she whispered. "The judge will see through it." But there was fear in her eyes. We both knew how powerful Dad's story had become. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Luca, his small body hooked up to machines, his shallow breathing, the beeping monitors. I couldn't bear the thought of him going back to that house, to Grandma, to Dad. Sophia called early in the morning with updates. "Your father has filed letters of support from dozens of military officers, local leaders, even a state senator," she said. "He's completed a parenting class, lined up a new doctor for Luca, and gotten glowing character references. On paper, he looks perfect." When Mrs. Harrison drove me to court, the sidewalks were packed. Veterans in uniform, families waving flags, and news vans lined the road. Dad had turned a custody hearing into a public spectacle. Inside, the courtroom was overflowing with Dad's supporters. Many wore yellow ribbons and pins that said, "Stand with our soldiers." When Dad walked in wearing his dress uniform, the crowd stood and clapped. Every detail was choreographed. Sophia squeezed my hand. "This will be hard," she whispered. "Stay calm. Tell the truth. Don't let him see you're afraid." When the judge entered, she scanned the packed room, her expression tight. "This is a custody hearing," she reminded everyone. "It is not a political event. We will focus solely on the welfare of the children." But it was clear. The atmosphere was charged. The air felt heavy with expectation, loyalty, and fear. Dad's lawyer began with an opening statement that could have been straight out of a campaign ad. He praised Dad's record, his heroism, his unwavering love for his children. He accused the Department of Children's Services of overreach and anti-military bias. When Sophia stood to respond, the gallery murmured. She calmly stated that this was not about patriotism. It was about 2 children who had nearly died due to neglect. She recounted the facts: Luca's coma, the hospital's findings, the CPS records, the bruises, the malnutrition. Her voice didn't waver. The judge called Dad's surprise witness. A tall man in dress blue stepped forward, his chest lined with medals. He introduced himself as Colonel Peter Holm, Dad's former commanding officer. My stomach dropped. Colonel Holm spoke about Dad's exemplary service and moral integrity. He said Dad had saved lives in combat, inspired younger soldiers, and shown remarkable leadership under pressure. He acknowledged that deployment took a toll on families and insisted that minor oversights should not define a man's character. Sophia objected, reminding the court that this wasn't a hearing about military performance, but child safety. The judge allowed the testimony to continue but warned the colonel to stay on topic. Dad's lawyer then paraded a series of character witnesses, fellow veterans, neighbors, his landlord, even his new boss at the security firm. Each one described Dad as honest, disciplined, and devoted. The narrative was seamless, an American hero wronged by an uncaring system. When Sophia's turn came to present rebuttals, she focused entirely on medical evidence. She laid out Luca's hospital records, photos documenting his condition, and the pattern of missed insulin doses. She presented the refrigerator pictures showing empty shelves, the CPS notes, and the hospital's timeline of Luca's admissions. But the most devastating evidence came from an unexpected source. A nurse from Luca's earlier hospital visits had kept private notes. In them, she'd written about finding bruises on me, about Luca complaining of hunger, about Grandma being too drunk to answer questions. Her records were dated long before any custody battle began, proof that the neglect had been real all along. Dad's lawyer tried to dismiss her testimony as unprofessional and biased, but the damage was done. For the first time, some of Dad's supporters in the gallery looked uneasy. Then Dr. Novak took the stand in person. Her voice was steady as she described Luca's medical charts, his blood work, and the long-term consequences of repeated neglect. She showed brain scans with early signs of diabetic damage. "If returned to an environment where his insulin is mishandled," she said, "he will not survive another episode like this." Dad's medical expert tried to counter her, claiming the damage was reversible and Dad had already arranged for proper medical care. But Dr. Novak's quiet authority filled the room. Her words carried the weight of truth. Finally, the court-appointed child advocate, Mrs. Elise Laurent, took the stand. She had interviewed Luca multiple times and watched how he reacted to discussions about his father. Her report was damning. She described Luca's trembling whenever Dad's name was mentioned, his nightmares about returning to Grandma's house, his visible relief when told he would not have to go back. "Luca told me he feels safe for the first time," she concluded. "He said, 'I don't want to be strong anymore. I just want to be okay.'" Dad's face twitched. His mask of calm cracked. "That's not true," he shouted, rising from his seat before his lawyer could stop him. "She's twisting his words." The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Callahan." The courtroom fell silent. Even some of his supporters looked away. For the first time, the image of the composed soldier began to crumble. The loyal father's mask had finally slipped, revealing the domineering soldier underneath. Sophia stood and called her final witness, me. My knees trembled as I walked to the stand, the weight of every eye in the room pressing on my shoulders. Dad's lawyer immediately objected. "Your Honor, the child has already testified. This is redundant." The judge shook her head. New evidence has been introduced since the last hearing. I'll allow it. Sophia gave me an encouraging nod. Olivia, do you remember the journal you started writing after being placed with the Harrisons? Yes, my voice came out thin. Can you tell the court why you wrote it? I swallowed hard. Because I knew my memories might be questioned. I wanted to make sure the truth couldn't be changed later. Please share what you wrote about that week before Luca was hospitalized. I opened the worn notebook on the stand, my hands shaking. Grandma fell asleep on the couch. Luca said he felt dizzy. His insulin pen was missing. I found it under the coffee table. When I tried to give him his shot, Grandma yelled and said I wasn't allowed to touch her things. Luca threw up that night. The next morning, he couldn't wake up. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of pens. Sophia's voice softened. Did you try to get help? Yes, I called 911 after he stopped answering me, but Grandma pulled the phone cord from the wall before I could finish. A few gasps rippled through the room. Sophia continued gently. And what did your father say when you spoke to him about it later? I hesitated, looking at Dad. His expression was blank, but his eyes burned. He called from Iraq. He said I needed to handle it like a man, except... My voice cracked. Except I wasn't one. I was 13, and I didn't know how to save him. Dad's lawyer rose sharply. Objection! The witness is editorializing. Sustained, the judge said, though her tone was careful. Olivia, please stick to what was said. I nodded quickly. He told me Grandma made him strong, and she would make me strong too. Dad's lawyer stepped forward for cross-examination. You're aware your father was deployed in a war zone at the time, correct? Yes. Do you think it's fair to expect him to monitor daily medical routines from thousands of miles away? I hesitated. No, but he chose Grandma. The lawyer smiled thinly. And you have something against your grandmother, don't you? You don't like her? I didn't like being hungry, I said quietly, or watching my brother almost die. His smirk faltered. He tried again. You've spent time with social worker Sophia Mueller, haven't you? She's been coaching you on what to say? No, I said, my voice rising. She told me to tell the truth. And who told you to keep this so-called journal? Nobody. I did it because I knew he wouldn't believe me. He leaned forward. He? You mean your father? Yes. Why not? He's your dad, isn't he? A decorated hero? He's a hero to everyone else, I said, my throat tight, but not to us. The courtroom murmured. Enough, the judge said firmly. Let the witness continue. I looked down at the table, then up again. I tried to protect Luca. I really did. But I couldn't keep him safe. Every time I asked for help, I got punished for it. I didn't want to testify. I didn't want to hurt him. But Luca almost died, and I can't let that happen again. When I finished, Sophia placed her hand over mine. I hadn't realized my entire body was trembling. The judge called for a brief recess. I sat between Sophia and Mrs. Harrison, staring at the grain of the wooden table, barely hearing their whispered reassurances. Through the glass door, I saw Dad pacing like a caged animal, whispering angrily to his lawyer. Some of his supporters had started leaving the courtroom. When we reconvened, Dad's lawyer launched his closing argument. He admitted mistakes had been made, but called them fixable. He spoke about Dad's service, his retirement, his sacrifice, and his determination to heal his family. He portrayed Dad as a man crushed by bureaucracy, misunderstood by civilians. Sophia's closing was calm, deliberate, devastating. She laid out the timeline. Each hospital admission, each missed insulin dose, every documented report of neglect. This is not about patriotism, she said evenly. This is about 2 children, one of whom nearly died. It is about a man who chose image over responsibility, silence over safety. These children need protection, not pity. Her words hung in the air long after she sat down. The judge stood and announced a 30-minute recess before delivering her verdict. Those 30 minutes felt endless. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, cameras, and shuffling papers. When the judge finally returned, everyone rose. She adjusted her glasses and spoke slowly, deliberately. This case has been one of the most complex I have ever presided over. It has revealed both the strength and the fragility of a family under pressure. Dad's eyes were fixed on her. Mine were fixed on Luca's photo that Sophia had placed on the table. The court acknowledges Mr. Callahan's honorable military service, the judge continued, but service to one's country does not absolve a parent of duty to their children. The evidence shows repeated medical neglect, a pattern of intimidation, and a concerning lack of accountability. The grandmother is unfit for caregiving due to substance abuse and past violence. Dad's jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. While I recognize the steps Mr. Callahan has taken to address his circumstances, I find them insufficient in light of the gravity of the past neglect. She paused. Permanent custody of the minors, Olivia and Luca Callahan, is hereby granted to the Department of Children's Services. The sound of my own breath caught in my throat. Mr. Callahan's parental rights are not terminated, the judge continued, but any contact will require completion of court-mandated rehabilitation programs and supervised visitation. The grandmother is prohibited from any unsupervised contact. The gavel struck once. The echo felt like thunder. Dad exploded. "This is wrong! You're destroying a veteran's family," he shouted. The guards moved closer. His lawyer tried to calm him, but he kept yelling. "You people are the reason soldiers come home broken. You take everything from us." The judge's voice cut through the noise. "Bailiff, remove him from the courtroom." As they led him away, he turned back toward me. His voice was lower now, trembling with rage. "You think you're free? You're still my daughter." Then he was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Sophia leaned over and whispered, "You did it. It's over." But it didn't feel over. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had thinned. Some protesters lingered, their flags drooping. A few reporters tried to ask questions, but Sophia shielded me as we walked to the car. I didn't answer any of them. At the Harrisons' house that night, Mrs. Harrison hugged me tight. "You were so brave," she said softly. I nodded, though I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. The next morning, the harassment stopped. The calls ended. The spray paint was scrubbed away. Even online, the noise faded as the full story emerged. Some of Dad's supporters posted apologies, admitting they hadn't known the details. Others stayed silent, pretending they'd never chosen a side. Luca and I were placed together in a therapeutic foster home run by a couple who specialized in children recovering from trauma. They knew how to manage his diabetes, how to build routines that didn't revolve around fear. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up afraid of footsteps in the hallway. 8 months later, Luca's health stabilized. His blood sugar stayed steady, and the doctors said his brain damage was minimal. He laughed more. He played again. Sometimes he even forgot he'd ever been sick. Dad tried once more to reach me, through a letter sent by his lawyer. It wasn't an apology, it was a plea. He wrote about forgiveness and how families should stick together no matter what. He said one day I'd understand why he did what he did. I gave the letter to my therapist. She helped me see it for what it was, a manipulation disguised as love. We talked about how real love doesn't demand silence, how protecting my brother wasn't betrayal, it was courage. 8 months turned into a year. Luca and I began to heal. His blood sugar was steady, his weight healthy, and his smile real again. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He still needed help with certain things, concentration, coordination, but he was alive, safe, and learning to be a kid again. Our new foster family was patient and kind. They had worked with children from broken homes before, but they treated us like family, not cases. We celebrated birthdays, cooked dinner together, and even went camping once, a small miracle after years of being afraid to sleep anywhere but near an exit. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to measure my words. No one screamed when I made a mistake. No one called me weak for crying. Dad finally stopped filing appeals. His lawyer informed the court that he was focusing on his new job and would not be pursuing further custody actions. Maybe the legal fees caught up with him. Maybe his reputation had taken too many hits. Either way, the silence was a relief I didn't know I needed. Grandma entered rehab shortly after the final ruling. CPS had pushed for it, and she agreed. I wanted to believe she could change, but I'd seen too much to hold my breath. She had been drinking longer than I had been alive. Still, she was out of our lives, and for that, I was grateful. The permanent foster family who took us in continued to help us rebuild. They taught me that strength wasn't about enduring pain in silence. It was about choosing not to pass that pain on. They showed us that discipline could come with gentleness, and that love didn't have to hurt. We decorated the Christmas tree together that year. When Luca hung a small ornament shaped like a syringe, I laughed so hard I cried. He said, "It's for Dr. Novak, because she saved my life." He wasn't wrong. Dr. Novak still checked in occasionally. So did Sophia. She told me the case had changed how the county handled military families. Now, when a soldier accused the system of bias, they had to provide real documentation, not just a uniform and a story. More children were being protected because of what happened to us. Sophia smiled when she told me that. "You didn't just save Luca," she said. "You changed the system." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long thinking of myself as a scared kid who froze under pressure, who lied to social workers, who let her brother almost die. But maybe, just maybe, I had done something good too. Months later, I saw Dad again by accident. I was walking through a grocery store with our foster mom when I turned down the produce aisle, and there he was. No uniform this time, no medals, just jeans, a wrinkled shirt, and tired eyes. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. His cart was half full. Milk, cereal, canned soup. He looked smaller than I remembered. I thought he might come over, say something, anything. But instead, he turned away and walked down the next aisle. I stood there for a long moment, frozen, until I realized something important. I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I saw him not as a monster, not even as a soldier, just as a broken man who had run out of people to control. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone I'd seen him. It didn't matter. That chapter was closed. Luca doesn't remember much about Grandma's house anymore. He knows he has diabetes. He knows he almost died. But he doesn't carry the weight of it like I do. He's too busy with soccer practice, math homework, and telling jokes so bad they make me snort milk out of my nose. He says he wants to be a doctor one day, like Dr. Novak. He volunteers at a diabetes camp now, teaching little kids how to check their blood sugar and give insulin shots. When one boy said he felt embarrassed about using insulin, Luca told him, "Taking care of yourself doesn't make you weak, it keeps you alive." I had to step outside after hearing that. I didn't want him to see me cry. I still have the journal I wrote during those dark months, the one that saved us. I keep it in a shoebox under my bed. I don't read it often, but sometimes I flip through the pages to remind myself of who I was and what we survived. Not to relive the pain, but to measure the distance between then and now. There are nights when I still wake up sweating, hearing echoes of my dad's boots in the hallway or Grandma's slurred shouting. But those memories don't control me anymore. They remind me of how far we've come, of how I learned that silence isn't strength and obedience isn't love. True strength is standing up, even when your voice shakes, even when the person you're standing up to is your own father. Sometimes Sophia emails me updates about other cases. One in particular, another child of a deployed soldier, was rescued because a teacher recognized the warning signs we once showed. That teacher had read the new CPS training manual that included our case. Our story. I don't think I'll ever fully escape it, but I've stopped running from it. I've started writing again, this time for myself, not for court. Essays, short stories, even a college application essay that my guidance counselor says could win scholarships. I wrote about resilience and protecting others, but I left out the details. Some truths belong to you alone. When people ask what I want to do after high school, I tell them I want to be a social worker. Most kids my age want to escape the system. I want to fix it. Sophia says she'll write my recommendation letter when the time comes. She jokes that I already have more field experience than most interns. She might be right. The Harrisons still send us Christmas cards every year. Even though we eventually move to a different foster placement, they write, "You'll always have a room here if you need it," and they mean it. Every year, I hang their card above my desk beside the one photo of Luca and me in the hospital. The day he woke up. His cheeks were hollow and my eyes were red from crying, but we were holding hands and smiling anyway. We survived. We are safe. We are together. And that's more than I ever dared to dream back, when Dad used his uniform as armor and Grandma's whiskey bottle was our clock. The scars are still there, deep and quiet. Trust takes time. Authority still makes me nervous. But every day, it gets a little easier to breathe. Every day I learn that love doesn't shout, doesn't demand silence, doesn't punish truth. It listens. It protects. It stays. And that kind of love, the kind that saves instead of scars, is the one I'll carry into the life I'm building now. Because in the end, Dad was wrong about what makes someone strong. Strength isn't born from fear. It's born from courage, from choosing to protect the vulnerable, even when the world calls it betrayal, even when the abuser wears a uniform and calls it love. That's the kind of strength I found, the kind that lasts, the kind that saved us.